Welcome back, everybody, to even more based AMAX 2011, 1911 purchasing information. Further proof that I actually read your comments, and if you ask a compelling question, I am actually a person with feelings, and maybe, just maybe, I will answer your question. Again, I talk about a lot of the high-end stuff because very little of it gets bought. Of the people that buy those, very few of them shoot. Of the ones that get shot, even fewer of those know what they're doing. And of those, it's pretty rare that someone can articulate to you in some kind of cogent fashion why you should not, what you should consider in making such a purchasing decision. I feel like I have the ability to articulate it in a way that's maybe helpful for some folks, at least enough that I was able to hang up my CDL a decade ago and have made a career out of it. So talking about the high-end stuff, I also realize that I'm talking to a very select market. Of those who aren't in that price range, Tony asked, well, what in the more moderately priced 1911, 2011s would you recommend? And that's a great question. And really kind of gets to the heart of something that I was trying to explain, but ended up, I didn't like the way that video turned out, so I decided to break it into a few pieces. So here's another piece, though, of what we'll call Normalville of 1911. So I would say we're talking about guns that live predominantly south of $2,000. What in there is worth looking at and buying? Now, prices are subject to change. Consider them relative, plus or minus $200-300, depending on what part of the election cycle we're in and all that stuff. But of the stuff that you could walk into mom and pop gun store, retail location, big box store, like a Shields, like a Cabela's, like a Sportsman's Warehouse, of guns that you would see there, what is worth your consideration? Also, keep in mind that when people ask me what I would buy, well, that's relative because I've made it pretty clear that I buy the high-end stuff and shoot the crap out of it. A lot of times people shopping in that price range tend to be people who like to buy guns more than they like to shoot. Not being ugly, sample size of many, people that shop in that realm, they tend to, when I was in the store, they tended to be buying more guns than they tended to be buying ammo. Well, if you shoot a lot, you're also kind of silly to buy ammo at retail, but that's a whole other thing. Of stuff that you would normally find on the shelf available in what we'll call the attainable price range, this side of Crazytown in Normalville, we're talking about production guns in the sense of they are set models. There's no options. They're just set SKUs from a manufacturer that you see mass produced and commonly available. For me, it's a very short list. I pretty much consider Springfield and Dan Wesson to be the list that I would consider. Now, hang on. I didn't say your particular brand, but it's my video. If you like, you can go make your own video. But where did I arrive at that? There are a few others on, case-by-case basis. These companies obviously compete with a few others. For me, these have been the best values. So this was the first gun that I bought. I've talked about this a few times. And this is on the higher end of the quality range of what Springfield recommend, or what they produce recommends. What they produce, it's held to a higher standard. To get better than this, you have to go through their custom shop, and then you're getting into stuff that competes with Wilson, Nighthawk, Atlas, all those guys. In the production runs, this is their kind of prime package. Held to higher tolerances, assembled a bit more tightly and precisely, but still has some of the features that you're going to get away from when you get into the higher end custom stuff. You're going to get more into tool steel, bar stock, small parts. This doesn't have that. This has MIM parts in it. You're going to get into different finishes. All right, so you get into more of the nitride type finishes, the salt bath, surface hardened finishes, more so than the spray and bake paint, and things like that. But Springfields have always, to me, represented a very solid value, and what you get at the base level is pretty good. All right, so the slide to frame fits on these are pretty good at all different levels, considering what you pay, but they are fit pretty good, and they stay that way for a long time. All right, that's the thing here with all talk about all these guns in different grades, is they stay that way for a long time. Well, what does that mean? All right, so if we consider a wrench, right? You know, these are tools, right? So guns are tools. We're talking 1911s here, all right? So we have 1911s to shoot, let's say 45 ACP, all right? We have a 9/16 wrench, all right? This is a wrench that I got for free with some thing that I bought. I don't even know why I had kept it in the drawer. But alas, here it is, 9/16 wrench. It is basically intended to give you for free so that you can put together the thing that you bought one time, and whatever else it does after that, sweet. But on its face, this is a 9/16 wrench, all right? So is this, all right? But these are not the same, all right? This is made to a much higher standard. It's made out of a harder material. It has a finish on it that will resist corrosion a lot longer. This will tighten a lot more 9/16 bolts than this will. All right. That's the same thing you have to consider when you're shopping in this price range, because everything in this price range was intended to hit a price point. In the custom gun videos, those brands that we're talking about, they're trying to make an end state. A CQB is an end state, that they want to make a gun a certain way. They want to perform a certain way. It results in a price, and they put it out there. And if you're willing to pay it, you pay it. And if not, sweet. Production-based guns like Springfields are not like that, all right? They're more like, all right, we need a gun like this to hit a certain price point. This is the higher end of what they do, all right? But in their head, they're like, this gun needs to cost, let's just say, snapshot in time, this is low, but for easy numbers, we need the nicest 1911 we can make, but we got to hit the $1,500 price point. What can we do? All right. And that's where it's like, okay, well, we can do a really good slide frame and a good barrel, but we're going to have to go MIM on some of the small parts to meet that price point. Okay, sweet. If they want to do this same gun, but they need to make this same gun hit, let's say, the $850 price point. Well, a lot of intricate machine work to checker that front strap. All right, the 20 LPI there, that is machine time, that is run time, all that kind of stuff. It's QC. Some of that stuff doesn't turn out right. All right, so higher reject rate. If they just give you a smooth front strap, that reduces machine time, and they can crank these out faster. They can offer it at a lower price point. Look at the MC Operator. All right, so the MC Operator, they give you a Pachmayr wraparound grip, so you have some texture on the front, or some of those models is just smooth on the front. Or the texture that they do give you, if you look at some of the more scallops that they do, they're easier to make than 20 LPI checkering is. They can offer it at a lower price point. They still gave you a good frame, slide frame, and a good barrel, All that was fit the same. Lickies and chewies on the outside were different. The grips they give you, are they G10 grips? Are they the cheap wood grips? Are they, plastic? What kind of grips do they give you? What kind of wood did they make them out of? All right. Wood grips aren't wood grips. So that's some of the stuff that they start to do to manipulate the price point. And Springfields have always represented a really high value for what they cost. I would have absolutely no qualms about buying anything that Springfield makes. Are they perfect? No. But guess what? They're a good company too, so they have a good customer service center as well, and a good warranty. This gun has actually been back to Springfield. All right. One of the things that I'm not going to take it apart, but one of the things that they do cheaper on a Springfield than some of the other high-end guns is the ejector. The ejector is that little guy right in there, that little flat piece in there. That's the ejector. The ejector is literally glued in place. All right. Now, that would seem like, I don't like the sound of that at all. Cool. But if we also think about, well, how much stress does that actually need to take? And bear in mind that it is pretty much encapsulated by the slide the whole time. So there's not a whole lot of places it can go. That's something for vast majority, 95% of the people who buy these, that is something they can get away with. So they put it in there. Guess what? If it comes loose, they'll fix it. They'll fix it. All right. So I actually had it, and then the same thing with the plunger on the side here. The little that holds the detent for your slide stop and your thumb safety. That is in there as well. Friction fit. And they use an adhesive that came loose, and I think that's actually what came loose on the whole thing. And then I had them check that as well. But their warranty, if you're the original owner, you send it back to them like, hey, this came loose, no charge. They send you a label, you send it back, they fix it, and they send it back to you, no problem. Well, it shouldn't happen in the first place. If you don't want it to happen in the first place, that's what you're paying for. And if it happens on this one, guess what? They'll take care of it too. But it's that kind of stuff that, if you have a problem with the Springfield, it's probably going to be something small like that. It's probably not going to be catastrophic. And if you have an issue, they'll take care of it. All right. So they hedge towards mass production, and the ones we have problems with will make it right. And in my experience with Springfield, and I have actually interacted with Springfield customer service, they have absolutely taken care of any issue that I had at no cost to me and very little downtime. So I'm comfortable buying anything that they make. That being said, though, kind of back to my wrench analogy here. All right. So I bought this because, remember, if you heard some of the other videos, I bought this when I was pretty young. I bought this on my 21st birthday, all right? And y'all know where you were on your 21st birthday. I mean, you weren't at the peak of your career, I would hope. If not, I mean, good for you, man. But, just getting started, this was the best one I can buy. If I would have just stayed on this gun the whole time, going back to the Guns of Grandmaster thing, I rotated through kind of a few guns on my journey. If I would have just stayed on this gun the whole time and not been interested in purchasing other guns, I probably would have had to massively rebuild this pistol. I don't really keep track of rounds. I wasn't keeping track of rounds in this particular era of my shooting career, so I have no real idea how many rounds are on this gun. If I had to guess, kind of educated guess, I would put it in the neighborhood of 5. I would put it south of 10, north of 5,000 somewhere. So if I would have taken all the rounds that I put on all the other single stack guns in competition and practice, and I would have just put it on this gun, I for sure would have, I don't know, almost 40 or 50,000 rounds on it. So I would have shot the barrel out of this one for sure. I could tell that I would probably, at this point, I would need to replace the the thumb safety. The thumb safeties on these are pretty loose. This is a cheaper Swenson style thumb safety that has a little junction in it that's harder to keep tight versus what is available in the Wilsons and the Dan Wessons. Now you'll see that this is retained by the hammer pin. There's a special hammer pin that holds it in, where on this one there's a little dingus that goes under the grip there. That's a lot cheaper to do, and pretty commonplace, but there's really just a tongue and groove in there that holds it all together, and over time the groove spreads out. So I would for sure have broken this or worn this out by now, and now I've had to replace it. That's a couple $100. All right, so if we take the base price of this gun, a couple $100, you know, if I would have had a fire control failure at this point, not necessarily guaranteed that I would, but you know, I might have had to redo hammer and sear on this one. I for sure would need a new barrel. The barrel would be shot out, and I would need to replace it. Now, depending who you are, you're like, okay, well, I'm willing to hedge that, and down the road I'll replace it. If you buy a gun like this, I would have absolutely no problem having another barrel fit into this gun because I started with good stock. All right. So I would have no problem putting a cart barrel in here and having a good gunsmith do that and then keep on trucking with this. But I started from good stock. Whereas some of the other brands that people want me to talk about, they're not good stock. The reason that they feel good to start with, you know, they come in fun colors. All right, well, they put a bunch of Cerakote on there. Cerakote is a paint. And as a slide goes back and forth, that paint's going to wear off. That fit is going to start to get looser. So it's going to start to chatter more. It's going to feel like crap. And it's going to start to expose, you know, the inadequacies of that gun. And so instead of you know, building on a foundation of bedrock, you built on a foundation of sand. Now you can build on sand. This house is built on sand. There's ways to do it, but it's not going to last as long, and whatever you build on top of it is on unstable footing. We're talking about a gun. If you're going to build on a base gun, start with a good base gun. And a Springfield is that. The next one worth considering, I would say, is Dan Wesson. Before I started the video here, I did a quick count in my head. I think I actually low-key own more Dan Wessons. Aside from Atlas, I own more Dan Wessons than any other brand. They've been workhorses for me for a while. I don't particularly want to roll all of them in front of the camera here, keep just a shade of privacy, but you've seen this one before. All right, so Dan Wessons are predominantly the guns that I've bought after this one for workhorse 1911s. Every criticism that someone would have of a Springfield has been rectified in a Dan Wesson. This is all tool steel parts. They are very good slide frame fits. They're very good barrels. They shoot pretty good. They come with good triggers, and they come optioned well. Now, you can't get it any way you want, but they do come optioned pretty well. I mean, this one has a flattened top strap with a French border on it. I mean, that's something you would pay several $100s on a semi-custom 1911 worksheet to have done. Now, if you like it on this model suite, and if you don't, well, I mean, this is how it comes. But Dan Wessons have always been very good values, especially when I first got into guns. They were secret. They were like a poor man's Ed Brown, because they're basically built out of all Ed Brown small parts. And eventually word got out, and their prices went up. When I first bought my first Dan Wesson, they were cheaper than Springfields, I think. Cheaper or the same. Now I would say they live, you know, comparable models probably live relatively. If a TRP is a $1,500 pistol, the comparable pistol in Dan Wesson would be like a Valor. I think a Valor, let's say it's about $500 more or less, you know, probably less than that, but they They're more, but in a similar price structure. Kind of enough. They're close enough that in my head you would consider them similar, but the Dan Wesson would definitely seem more expensive. But you're getting more for your money. You're getting tool steel parts that are fit together pretty well. And so Dan Wessons and Springfields are pretty much the list of what I would recommend in the world of commonly available production guns. If you can find one that's configured a way you like, or it's close enough that you could nudge it there. All right. So this Wilson actually is a good example of that. This Wilson didn't come exactly the way I wanted it, but I knew all I had to do was add a flat trigger and an MB safety, and then I would be home free. All right. I didn't completely redo the whole thing. There's like 2 accessories, and I think my rule is $300. All right. If you're going to throw more than $300 in accessories at a gun, have a good reason, or ask yourself why you're doing that and if that's actually the gun you want to buy. So if little touch points on here are things you can change, go ahead and do it. But those are the ones that I recommend as being really good values that are worth your money. I realize there's a lot of brands in there that I didn't mention. I wouldn't buy them. That's just me. Except on a case-by-case basis. Smith & Wesson. Smith & Wesson has done some good 1911s over the years. The Doug Koenig edition, I actually thought that was a really good pistol. They're kind of hard to find now. But it just kind of depends. But in, I've been in the industry now, I guess, over a decade. In over a decade of being in the industry, and then before that as a customer, Springfields and Dan Wessons have always been solid values. In the world of 2011s or, wide body 1911s, I would say the same thing. I don't really have any of those because I obviously endorse Atlas guns, so I have Atlas guns for all the wide body stuff that I do. But if I were going to buy one, I think the DWX. I think the DWX is a solid idea, a solid platform. If it fits your form factor. There are a few others. I don't really have experience with them other than to play with them, maybe shoot a magazine or 2 through them. So I don't really have a whole lot to say on those. But in all of those, if it comes as a set model, there's not a drop down that you're ordering. It's kind of made to order. If it's a set model, before you spend your money on it, I would say, is that configuration what you want? Or are you going to base gun it? If you're going to base gun it and build it into something else, I would say don't do that. Save up some more money and get it built right the first time before you buy it. But I think considering what they are and what you pay, the Dan Wessons are a pretty fair value. The Springfields are a pretty fair value for what you pay if you use good magazines. I think Staccatos can be a good value. I think they're a bit overpriced for what they are right now, but when they first rebranded as Staccato, they were pretty sweet. If you're a law enforcement officer, that program, their pricing on the law enforcement program, that is pretty sweet. So just keep in mind of what you're buying and what your goal is. But those are pretty much the ones that I would buy. Springfield, Dan Wesson. Now, when you're like, man, those are kind of the expensive ones, or on the edge of the expensive ones. If you're looking at a new Dan Wesson and they're up there in the $1,800 price range, let's say, I mean, they're up in there somewhere, depending which one you're looking at. Here's the other thing to consider. The higher end gun we're looking at, the higher price range we're in, the higher tier of product we're looking at, the more comfortable I am buying it used. All right. So if your question was, would you buy a new Dan Wesson or a used Wilson Combat? I'm pretty confident buying a used Wilson Combat, especially if you can tell that it has wear characteristics of not getting shot very much, which is most of them. So if you look at, now this one has started to get shot a little bit, but like not a whole lot of the galling on the barrel, on the hood here. This one's dirty, but like where it rubs on here. Magwell is also a key. Like, you could look at this one and be like, this guy's used it a lot. But when I bought this one, this was pretty much virgin down here, and this thing was 8 years old already. So shot very little over 8 years, lived in a safe. I'm very comfortable buying used in the high-end stuff because it's made from good stock. It's built by people who know what they're doing, and they stand behind it. If you call them up, get them on the phone. If you're not happy with something, they will take care of it. Most of my Atlases I've gotten used. I have acquired a few used ones. But other than that, like most of the high-end guns that I have, I poached them used. I hunted on the used market and discovered them, and those have been some of the best values that I've found. You know, if I were not an Atlas athlete and I were looking to try and get an Atlas pistol, I would be looking on the used market hard. I would be on armsandarms.com every single day, waiting for the one that I wanted to roll through, because they do roll through fairly often, because people who buy them new, if they're in that group that they like nice things but they don't use them, they tend to shed them, you know, fairly frequently. So on the used market, you can find some pretty good stuff. So when you're, you know, if you're like, well, that's kind of expensive, but you're looking in this realm, that's something to think of too. I have no problem buying something like this used. But in the realm of Normalville, Dan Wesson and Springfield are the ones that I look at if you're going to shoot. If you're going to shoot and shoot a lot, or you want to make a solid investment in something that's going to last a long time. And to me, that is the list. Nothing against people who aren't on the list, but based on my experience, those are the brands I turn to in the realm of Normalville. Hope that answered your question. If you guys got any more that you want me to get into on this stuff, I feel like there's so much more to talk about, but when you guys ask a question, it just kind of puts in a nice little package for me. So something that I can put together a little presentation for you and speak on. So if you find this kind of stuff helpful and you have more questions, shoot them down below, and we'll get you on another day. But until then, see you on the range soon, and happy shopping.